Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Megan White. Today we commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Battle for Shaggy Ridge. Australian forces began offensive actions in New Guinea after turning back a Japanese invasion force at Mill Bay in 1942 and defeating an attack on the town of Wau in January 1943. After the 7th and 9th Divisions had secured Lae and Nazab in September 1943, the 9th Division had landed on the Huon Peninsula, securing Finchhaven in preparation to begin clearing inland. The next objective for the Australians was Shaggy Ridge, a 6.5 kilometre long spur, standing 1,700 metres high, dotted by several rocky outcrops, which the Australians named Green Pinnacle, the Pimple, Green Sniper's Pimple, and Mackay's Knoll. There was a single track along the ridge line, which in places was barely wide enough for one man to pass, with sheer drops on either side. It was described by one soldier as a one-man front. On a clear day, you could see as far north as Madang, but the ridge was often covered in thick fog, concealing a series of high positions held by the Japanese infantry, supported by artillery and engineers. By the 20th of October, a company of the 27th Battalion under the command of Lieutenant Bob Clampett had established a toehold on the southern slopes of the ridge. Clampett had the nickname Shaggy, and it was after him that the features became known. Daily patrols probing Japanese positions around the Pimple revealed that a frontal assault on the single track running along the ridge was the only option. After heavy mists surrounding the Pimple lifted on the morning of the 27th of December, the Japanese positions on the ridge were bombarded by Australian and US fighter bomber aircraft, along with mortar and artillery fire. The men of the 2nd 16th Battalion clambered forward through the tangled mess of scrub and tree roots. Knocking out an enemy bunker, they occupied the Pimple and advanced as far as Green Sniper's Pimple, where a pillbox held up the advance. Pioneers cut track around it, and the next day the pillbox was blasted by high explosives supplied by the engineers. By the morning of the 28th of December, the Japanese had been thrust from the Pimple, but still held the northern half of Shaggy Ridge. On the first day of 1944, the 21st and 25th Brigades were given a much-needed rest, and the 18th Brigade, consisting of the 2nd 9th, 2nd 10th and 2nd 12th Battalions, went in with the 15th Brigade of the Militia. As the 2nd 9th continued the Battle of Shaggy Ridge, the 2nd 10th advanced and occupied the enemy's attention in the valley below. The 2nd 12th took advantage by venturing along the Mean River to the west of Shaggy Ridge, attempting to outflank the 75mm mountain gun that had been pounding the 2nd 9th. The mountain gun would be knocked out by a direct assault across the gully, but not before it had caused immense damage. With the gun being taken too late in the evening to allow for evacuation, the wounded would have to wait until morning to return to the valley floor, driving back a nighttime Japanese attack in the cold, muddy rain. Men who were veterans of Tobruk, Milne Bay and the Beachhead battles would remember it as the longest bloody night of their lives. The enemy was now caught between two Australian battalions along a 3-kilometre stretch of ridgeline. After some fierce fighting, the two battalions met on Shaggy Ridge on the 23rd of January, 75 years ago today. From September 1943 to April 1944, the 7th Division and supporting units had lost 204 killed and 464 wounded in actions in New Guinea. It suffered 20 times these battlefield casualties, with men lost to illness and tropical diseases. Today, we pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. We warmly welcome those families who had ancestors involved in this action, who are in attendance this evening. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. Australia's Federation Guard is a tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier within the Hall of Memory. I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Catapult party, maintain, strength. Catapult party, present, arms.
Australians, all let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We
If you're able, please be seated.
Catafalque party, order, arms.
The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Lance Sergeant Bezalel Beth-Halevy. Bezalel Beth-Halevy was born in the Polish city of Kalisz on the 25th of May 1913, the son of Israel and Shaggy Beth-Halevy. On the eve of the German invasion in 1939, the Jewish population of Kalisz numbered over 20,000. Kalisz was captured by the Wehrmacht almost instantly, and by the summer of 1942, the Jewish community in Kalisz was entirely destroyed. By then, Abraham's family had settled in Tel Aviv in what was then the British Mandate of Palestine. Abraham came to Australia in June 1939 to compete in a test series of soccer matches. The players were mostly from the powerful Maccabi Tel Aviv club side, with a few players from other sides, included to create a Palestine banner under which to play. Before leaving for Australia, the touring party laid a wreath on the Australian War Memorial opposite the entrance gates of the British War Cemetery at Mount Scopus in Jerusalem, in memory of the fallen Australian soldiers from the First World War. Abraham, a fullback, who had previously played representation football for Egypt, was also known as a personality man of the team and was interviewed by newspapers about the tour. The trip was rough, and the team sometimes had to sleep on luggage racks between matches, as they had been limited to travelling with second-class train tickets. Although the tourists lost the Test series, they won 11 and drew 3 of the 19 matches. While some of the press coverage of the matches was negative, Abraham Beth-Halevy, Abraham Resnick and Menahem Mervotic received offers to play for local clubs, but elected to remain in Australia. After the outbreak of the Second World War in September 1939, Menahem Miramovic enlisted for service, joining the 2nd 11th Battalion, and was killed in action in New Guinea on the 12th of May 1945. Abraham anglicised his name to Abraham Beth-Halevy. He found work as an accountant and accommodation in North Carlton and became engaged to Sarah Wayman. He too volunteered to join the 2nd Australian Imperial Force, enlisting on the 5th of March 1942. After a period of training in Australia, in December he embarked from Townsville to join the 2nd 12th Battalion, which was in New Guinea for some of the most bitter and costly battles of war. At Buna, it delivered the coup de grace to the Japanese force at Goropa Point, but suffered 63 killed and 122 wounded in the process. The battalion's later efforts to clear the Japanese from the tortuous swamp country around Sanananda cost another 61 lives. In February, Beth-Halevy was promoted to corporal. The 2nd 12th returned home in March, and the following month he was admitted to hospital with malaria, a recurring malady which struck him again in July. In August, he had recovered sufficiently to rejoin his battalion, training around Port Moresby, and being promoted to Lance Sergeant before deploying to the Finisterre Mountains on the 31st of December. The following day, the 2nd 19th, the 2nd 10th and the 2nd 12th Battalions, along with the 15th Brigade of the Militia, replaced the 21st and 25th Brigades, which had been fighting since September. As the 2nd 9th continued the battle on Shaggy Ridge, the 2nd 10th advanced and occupied the enemy's attention. The 2nd 12th took advantage by adventuring along the Mean River to the west of Shaggy Ridge, creeping unnoticed towards a 75mm mountain gun that had been pounding the 2nd 9th. As the men came up within 100 metres of the gun, it turned on them, firing across a small gully at point-blank range. Shells burst into the tree canopy above, wounding and maiming many. The mountain gun was eventually knocked out by a direct assault across the gully, but not before it had caused immense damage. 13 members of the 2nd 12th Battalion were killed and 48 wounded. The gun had been silenced too late in the evening to allow for the evacuation of the wounded, who would have spent the night on the mountain before making their way back down to the valley floor, but not before repelling a nighttime Japanese assault. Among the dead was Lance Sergeant Abraham Beth-Halevy. He was 30 years old. Initially buried where he fell, he was later reburied in Dumpu War Cemetery, and then Lay War Cemetery, where his remains lie today, under the epitaph, "The beauty of Israel is slain upon thy high places." His name is listed on the roll of honour to my left, amongst almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lance Sergeant Abraham Bezalel Beth-Halevy, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
Party, shoulder!
They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Catapult party, present, arms. Catapult party, shoulder, arms.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Catapult party, now birds, turn. Catapult party, quick, march.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.